make sure that they live as a free people?
Yes, I certainly can confirm that, Mr. Speaker. And what I can also say is that I believe by making this invasion, I think that President Putin has done more than anybody else to bring his regime to an end. Because I think in the end he will pay a huge price for what he has done, and I know that this House will want to make it so.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Can I welcome and support the measures outlined by the Prime Minister today? Putin is a gangster and a despot who has been trying to undermine and subvert democracy across the world for years. One of the tools that he uses is through political donations to political parties, including in this country. Will the Prime Minister commit today to ridding the democracy in London from to ridding Russian money out of democracy in this country?
Yes, of course, Mr. Speaker.
Flight Drummond.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania and Poland today triggered Article 4 of the North Atlantic Treaty, and I think I heard that we are going to be joining in those discussions. But can my right honourable friend assure our NATO allies in Eastern Europe that we stand firmly with them, particularly the Baltic states that have significant Russian populations?
I thank her very much. She's completely right, and that's why one of the first things we did was to strengthen our presence in Estonia in the way that I've described, and our Canadian friends are strengthening their presence in Latvia, and we will make sure that we give the Baltic states in particular, who seceded from the Soviet Union, who became free and independent at that amazing moment, give them all the security that they deserve.
Debbie Abrahams.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. There's overwhelming evidence that Russian state actors have been involved in trying to disrupt and destabilise Western democracies using social media platforms such as Facebook. So what is the government doing to ensure that this isn't used in these events?
Mr. Speaker, as I said, I think in an answer a couple of days ago, we've got no evidence of disruption of UK elections or electoral events as a result of Russian activity, but the Online Harms Bill is there to provide such protections.
Thank
you, Mr. Speaker. Can I thank my right honourable friend for his statement, and indeed thank the Leader of Her Majesty's Opposition for his supportive and moving words. But can I also reinforce the point made by my honourable friend for Huntingdon? Why has it come to this pass? How has the West in general, and the United Kingdom in particular, been so asleep at the switch for such a long period of time? And I commend the Defence and Security Review, but isn't it now time to ask what the permanent and impartial machinery of our government does, failing to provide ministers with consistent advice about the strategic threats that our country faces?
Mr. Speaker, I think there are all sorts of reasons for the failure of the West to take sufficient account of the threat of Vladimir Putin since 2014, but the two biggest are oil and gas.
Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, with cyber attacks and falsehoods, Russia is peddling lies today. Now, observers on the ground are crucial to relay the truth. Now, in recent weeks, the UK has withdrawn its team from the OSCE Special Monitoring Mission because staff safety is key. But can the Prime Minister look again to support international efforts like this to get to the facts and counter Russian disinformation?
I thank the MMR teams. They're wonderful. I've met them, and they do a fantastic job. I'm sorry that they've had to be withdrawn for the duty of care reasons that he rightly alludes to, and we will keep it under constant review.
Liam Fox.
The 1994 Budapest Memorandum saw Ukraine give up its nuclear weapons in return for a security guarantee not only signed by Britain and the United States, but by Russia. Does my right honourable friend believe that Ukraine would have been invaded had it retained its nuclear weapons? And what does it say about the value of a Russian signature on any international agreement?
Well, it's clear that President Putin sets no store by international law, whatever, and that is just one of the legal obligations that he has torn up.
Bestie Black.
Thank you very much. Mr. Speaker, we awoke this morning to images of innocent families cowering in tube stations. We know the Putin regime's propensity for repression and tyranny, particularly when it comes to minorities. Will the Prime Minister ensure that humanitarian aid is delivered not just in concert with other international partners, but also with third sector organisations?
Yes, of course. The third sector plays an invaluable role.
Graham Stewart.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the Prime Minister's statement and his specifically ruling out the threat of creeping normalisation, because this House should be under no doubt that Putin is well prepared. He has hundreds of billions of foreign currency reserves. He has a military that has been tested. And will the Prime Minister do everything he can to convert the current intent into frameworks that cement our intent over time, because he is betting on the fact that it won't be?
My honourable friend is absolutely right, because the plan that the G7 have agreed on and our friends and partners have agreed on is that Putin must fail. Putin must not succeed in this venture. But we've got to put in place all the steps we need to take, diplomatically, economically, and yes, militarily, in order to ensure that that is the case. And that's what we're doing.
Very good.
The Prime Minister is right to have set out the most stringent possible set of sanctions against the government of Russia. Can he outline for the House what the implications will also be for cooperation at the International Space Station?
I thank him. I thank him very much. We will have to see what further downstream effects there are on collaboration of all kinds. I must say that hitherto I have been broadly in favour of continuing artistic and scientific collaboration, but in the current circumstances it's hard to see how even those can continue as normal.
Sir John Hayes.
Speaker, the mix of practice and principle is the test of democratic politics, exemplified at its best when this House comes together in common cause. The test of leadership is the mix of vision and will, and the Prime Minister is to be commended for his willful, clear-sighted determination. So will he now reassure the House that he's in close touch with those countries close to Ukraine, where nerves will be frayed, and that will he send them an urgent message that this House and this nation will always stand alongside and behind free nations?
He is, the right honourable gentleman, as so often, is precisely right, and that's why, together with my right honourable friends, the Defence Secretary, the Foreign Secretary, we've been visiting Poland, Romania, the Balts, all those who are now feeling such deep unease at what is happening.
Alistair Carmichael.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we speak, the Softcom Flot tanker NS Challenger is berthed at Sullombo in Shetland, taking on a load of crude oil for export. Softcom Flot, as the Prime Minister may know, is a company owned and operated by the Russian government. My constituents, Mr. Speaker, are asking me why they should be loading oil onto a Russian tanker while Russian troops are marching into the Ukraine. I cannot think of any good answer to give them. So, can the Prime Minister tell me, will anything that he has announced today ensure that that will not happen again in the future?
Well, I can tell him, thank him very much, and I will of course immediately investigate what is happening with the Softcom Flot oil tanker. But the result of the measures that the House passed the other day is that we can now target any entity, any company that has any relation with the Russian state. So we have that power.
Tim Bolton.
Speaker, tyrants and megalomaniacs invade countries because they think they can get away with it. And the way to deal with bullies is to stand up with them. So I'm sure he will acknowledge that the way the West responds to this aggression will have repercussions not just for Russia and Ukraine, but for other bullies like China as well. And will he be mindful of the need to show support to Russia's smaller southerly neighbours, especially Georgia and Armenia, who feel particularly vulnerable at this time?
Yes, I thank him. He's right. because the read across, the knock-on is obvious for Georgia and Armenia. What he proposes to create, Putin, is a new sphere of influence, a new Yalta, in which those countries come behind his new Iron Curtain.
Stephen Wakefield.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a member of this House with Ukrainian heritage, this issue particularly troubles me. I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for his tone of his statement and the resolute and swift action that he's proposing in tackling Russia, but the resolute and swift support he's offering to the people of Ukraine. During his speech, he also highlighted the issues of the cost of living and the rise of fuel prices. Could he also touch on what further action the government will take in order to address that issue?
I thank him very much, and I think he's quite right, because I think people across the country will be thinking about the effect on us all of the increase in the price of oil and gas as a result of a war in Ukraine. We will continue to do everything we can to help people to abate the cost, to support people through councils, through all the funds that we're giving, the reduction in council tax, Mr. Speaker. But the best thing that we can do is ensure that people are in good, well-paying jobs, and that is in that we are certainly succeeding. But in the medium and the long term, we've got to have more self-reliance in this country on our own energy supplies, and that is what this government is also committed to building.
Geoffrey Clifton-Brown.
Mr. Speaker, one of the most important economic sanctions we can take against Russia is by freezing its sovereign debt. Will my right honourable friend confirm that the bill proposed on Monday on economic crime will include powers to do so?
Mr. Speaker, we're taking the most powerful measures against Russia and the Russian economy that have ever been taken. I think probably the most powerful ever taken by any country. And Russia will no longer be able to raise any sovereign debt on UK markets.
Olivia Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the Prime Minister what support we will be providing Ukrainian citizens settled in the UK who wish to reunite with their family members still residing in Ukraine. Many have watched their cities rapidly get caught up in this conflict and are keen to know what more we could be doing to support them to reunite their families.
Mr. Speaker, we will make sure that we support Ukrainian nationals who need to leave to visit to come to this country to meet their relatives. Of course, we'll do that.
Stephen McPartland.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm proud the Prime Minister in this country are leading international support for our friends in Ukraine. Domestically, will the Prime Minister be providing more support for organisations such as our NHS, public sector organisations and businesses that will now be the subject of Russian cyber attacks?
He's right to point to this risk, Mr. Speaker, and I think it's foresighted. We're investing massively in cyber protection. I think another £2.6 billion we're putting in. I think in the last few years we've tackled more than 3,000 cyber attacks. It is a risk. It's a risk that I'm afraid we must run in the cause of freedom.
Matt Robert.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I'd like to offer my wholehearted support for much tougher sanctions against President Putin and his dreadful regime. Mr. Speaker, as the honourable gentleman from Lockerbie mentioned earlier, there are many historic Ukrainian communities in Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and indeed I would like to commend the work of the Reading Ukrainian Centre. I would like to ask the Prime Minister what additional support can the government give to these very valuable community groups and centres around the country who offer such support to families, friends, relatives, both in the UK and in the Ukraine.
I think, Mr. Speaker, perhaps the most important thing we can do for the Ukrainian community in this country is thank them, recognise them for everything that they've done for us in the last decades. They've been an amazing addition to the UK economy, to our cultural and artistic life.
John Barron.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The House is united in its condemnation, but I suggest to the Prime Minister that the lessons to be addressed from this affair started with the invasion of Georgia, Russia's invasion of Georgia in 2008 and not 2014. And given, many of us across the House have been warning about Russia, and yet the response has been weak. Does the Prime Minister accept that as we enter the battle for democracy globally, we have got to understand that the sooner you square up to the playground bully, the better, and that we adequately support our hard and soft power to do that.
Yes. Yes, he is quite right, and I know that by soft power he's thinking also of the British Council, which can have such a wonderful beneficial effect across Russia, and I've seen its work across Russia. But, Mr. Speaker, he's right about standing up to the playground bully. We should have done it ages ago. I think the scales have fallen from the eyes of many of our friends and partners.
Dr. Philippa Whitford.
Thanks very much, Mr. Speaker. In an earlier response, the Prime Minister suggested that this country would welcome people who were reuniting with family here. I have a constituent who's Ukrainian, but a British citizen who's trying to bring her mother from Ukraine, but being turned down because she is over 18. Her mother is on her own, has no family, so naturally she's frightened. So will we see a change in the Home Office to enable British citizens who are Ukrainian to bring their vulnerable family here?
Yes, I thank her very much. I think I read out a helpline number in the House on Tuesday. I don't have it again. There is a number both in Lviv and in this country. But if she could do me the favour and send me the details, well, I'll take them up.
Richard Rax.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I commend my honourable friend and his ministers for the firm stance they're taking? None of us know where or what Mr. Putin's longer-term aims are. If Ukraine falls, and I fear it might, his covetous eye might land on the Baltic states and other vulnerable countries. Can my right honourable friend reassure NATO members that if one Russian boot lands on NATO soil, military force will be met by military force?
Yes, and what is so encouraging, Mr. Speaker, is that the whole House understands the vital importance of that Article 5 guarantee that we make to every one of the 30 members of NATO.
Tony Lloyd. Sir Tony.
The Prime Minister quite rightly pits this as being a battle between the party of law and those who support international law. There is only one lawful government in Ukraine. That's the government of President Zelensky. If they are forced to move, forced possibly into exile in the short run or the longer run, will the Prime Minister state very clearly that we will make sure they can be a functional and effective government wherever they operate from?
It's a very important point that he raises. I'm grateful, and that's why in our discussions with President Zelensky we are seeing what we can do to give them the practical support that they need to continue.
Robert Jenny.
The City of London is a global asset whose enduring success doesn't rest on dirty money. It rests on a commitment to excellence and on the adherence with the rule of law. So it's right that we now use that as a way to show global leadership. Can I encourage my right honourable friend to sanction all of the remaining Russian banks, to sanction the executives associated with them, and I notice that many are resigning today, to publish a further list of individuals, resident in this country or otherwise, to be sanctioned, and to redouble his excellent efforts to suspend Russia from SWIFT as the single most effective immediate step that the West could do to put pressure on Vladimir Putin.
I thank him very much. I thank him particularly for his important testimonial to the City of London, whose work should not be sullied, Mr. Speaker, by association with ill-gotten Russian money. But the programme that he set out for sanctions is exactly the right one, and the one the government is following.
Mike Kane.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Returning hate for hate multiplies hate, adding deeper darkness to a night already devoid of stars. Will the Prime Minister reiterate that our quarrel is not with the Russian people? It is with their leader, Vladimir Putin, and he has committed a very, very grave error.
He is so right, and I know that that is what the House thinks. We admire the Russian people. Our links to the Russian people go back to the time when we stood shoulder to shoulder to fight fascism with the Russian people. Russia's contribution to culture, to arts, literature, to music, unparalleled. It is an extraordinary country, and nothing that we do or say should obscure that.
Shrebadley.
Winston Churchill created the Council of Europe as a bastion against fascism and communism. And since the fall of communism, Russia has set great importance by its membership as a fig leaf of respectability. Every time our Conservative group has tried to get them expelled, we've been foiled by Russian gold. Will the Prime Minister now instruct his ambassador on the Council of Europe to move for the immediate expulsion of Russia from the Council of Europe so there is no place for gangsters in the halls of civilised nations?
Yes, I think eloquently put, Mr. Speaker, and he's dead right. And I think that my honourable friend for Henley made the point the other day, and I certainly, who's on the Council of Europe, and I certainly agree with that.
Geraint Davis.
Mr. Speaker, so many Russians today see the attack on Ukraine as they would see an attack of their father on their mother, because there's such intimate family relationships between these two groups. And today, thousands of Russians are protesting in cities against their domestic law, against this awful war. Will he provide them with his support? Will he amplify their support to help reduce the support, any support there is for this ridiculous war, and also provide sanction and safe haven for people, refugees, including troops who may want to re-engage, the troops outside of Ukraine, so they can re-engage, so we can win this war at home and abroad?
He makes a series of extremely important observations, and yes, I think it's vital that we get the message across to the whole of Russia about what is really going on. They're being lied to day after day, and I think that his point about supporting troops who need temporary exile, as it were, is a very good one.
Peter Byrne.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank the Prime Minister for yet again coming to House to keep us informed and for his leadership in this crisis. He was right to provide military aid to Ukraine, but the Ukrainian ambassador did ask for our support in a no-fly zone today. In his answer earlier, I think the Prime Minister was keeping that option open. Is that correct?
Yeah. I think it's pretty clear to the House, Mr. Speaker, that we're trying to keep all our options open on this front. Some of them, frankly, may be more practicable than others, and I think we must also have a dose of realism about what we can do on the military front. But we will keep all things under review.
Rachel Hopkins.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Many of the residents in my constituency come from a number of the countries on the eastern flank and still have relatives living there. Obviously, like us, they will be deeply concerned about the humanitarian impact of the crisis. So, what steps is the government taking to prepare for the humanitarian issues? And with the 1,000 troops on standby to help with humanitarian assistance, will they now be deployed?
I think she raises a very important point, and what we're seeing now, tragically, is people moving west, out of Kyiv, columns of traffic, as I'm sure the House knows. People already moving into southeastern Poland. There is going to be an influx, as I said to the President of Poland, Prime Minister of Poland as well. We're there to help.
Laura Trott.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I thank the Prime Minister for his statement today and for his strong package of sanctions. I want to ask him about preventing sexual violence in conflict. In November last year, we issued a strong statement which said that the use of sexual violence as a weapon in conflict is a red line akin to the use of chemical weapons. Will he reaffirm that commitment today, and will he send a strong message to Russia that the international community will not tolerate the use of sexual violence in conflict?
Yes, and I thank her for all the work that she's done on that issue. It's something that the UK government has campaigned on for a long time, and indeed raised the issue very greatly in public international consciousness. I think it should be treated as a war crime like any other, and people who perpetrate sexual violence in conflict can expect to be tried in those tribunals.
John Warren.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. In seeking to redraw the boundaries of Europe through bloodshed, Putin has attacked not only the Ukraine but all of us, and we stand with the Ukraine and standing for the rule of law. I welcome the sanctions that he's announced, but I was confused by his response on Russian disinformation, which he seemed to imply would be addressed by the online safety bill. That is many, many, many months away. Russian disinformation is organised, their bots are state-sponsored. What steps will he take to address them?
I thank her. We've got and she raised a good point, but we've got, what we're doing is a massive, positive Stratcoms campaign in Russian, in Ukrainian, to make sure that people get the truth and they hear the truth.
Adam Holloway.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As we've noticed this afternoon, virtually everyone in this House has supported the efforts towards resistance over the last few months and in these days. I imagine the House will also support the very different sort of warfare under occupation over the coming months and possibly years. But the House will also have noticed the marvellous way the Prime Minister has spoken directly to the Russian people today. And I hope that he will bear in mind that at the moment public opinion in Russia is rather different. That does underline the importance of accurate information.
Prime Minister.
Yes. He is quite right, and I thank him. He's a distinguished former soldier, and he knows that truth is the first casualty. We have to make sure that we are telling people exactly what is going on, and to the best of my knowledge at the moment, the Ukrainians are resisting much more strongly than some people had thought that they would. Who knows how long they can keep going? Let's hope they can, and let's encourage them to do so. But, Mr. Speaker, let's get the message out as well. I think that is our job.
Chris Bryant.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister is absolutely right. We equivocated shamelessly after Crimea. We were spineless. We must not be spineless now, because what will inevitably happen is either the Baltic states, one of the members of NATO, or perhaps Sweden or Finland will feel the wrath of Putin next. And that will mean British action. Don't we need to try and set in train now a process whereby Putin himself ends up in the dock in a court? Norman Burkitt said, who was the alternate British judge at Nuremberg, said at Nuremberg, initiating a war of aggression is not only an international crime, it is the supreme international crime, differing only from other war crimes in that it contains within itself the accumulated evil of the whole. He must be brought to a court of law and end his days in prison, mustn't he?
Mr. Speaker, I think one of the most fascinating things about what Putin is doing is how close an analogy there is between his actions and those of Slobodan Milosevic. Exactly the same nonsense being peddled about the mystical union between Kosovo and Belgrade as between Kiev and Moscow. Exactly the same aggression, and remember that Slobodan Milosevic died on trial.
Sorry. Mark Harper.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. I welcome the package of sanctions set out by the Prime Minister and the fact that he's confirmed more will come. If they are to be successful at punishing President Putin for what he has done to date and deterring him from going further and attacking our NATO partners, they must be sustained. And if they're to be sustained, we must be honest with the British people that there is going to be a cost for them. We are going to have to pay an economic cost, but it's a cost we must pay, and it pales into insignificance compared to the cost of the people of Ukraine.
Yes, and not only is that true, Mr. Speaker, but the opportunity and the reward for success and being strong is huge. Because if this should end, Mr. Speaker, with the rejection of aggression and the rejection of the Putin regime's view of the world, then that would be a massive, massive benefit, and an economic benefit as well, to the whole world.
Chamberlain.
Mr Speaker. Up until May 2021, Valentina Yakovleva was my constituent. She resided in Scotland for 20 years with her daughter and her family. But due to an initial error in an application, she eventually exhausted appeals and was deported with 2 COVID JAGs last year. Now that 71-year-old is sheltering in a subway. In response to the Honourable Member for Central Ayrshire, who's no longer in her place, I would reiterate, does the Prime Minister agree with me that as we face a likely refugee crisis, the UK must be doing all it can to extract individuals who have immediate family relatives in the UK, and urge for support for this case?
Yes. Again, I thank her very much for drawing the case to my attention. If she sends me the details, I'll be happy to make sure it's properly taken up by the Home Office.
Can I just say, those who didn't get in, we have got a list for next time, because this will definitely not be the end. OK. Let people leave before I come to the adjournment.
He took the